I, 32 male, spent 2 months planning the proposal down to the last detail. For years with Isabella, 30, felt like a lifetime in the best way, and I was ready. This wasn't going to be some generic flash mob proposal. It had to be personal. The ring was the centerpiece of the whole thing. I knew she had a Pinterest board full of giant, colorless diamonds that looked like they belonged in a museum vault, but I wanted something with a story. I worked with a local artisan, a guy who looks more like a blacksmith than a jeweler, to design it. We sourced a cushion-cut Montana sapphire, a deep teal color that changed in the light, the exact shade of her eyes when she was genuinely happy. The platinum band was simple, with a subtle Celtic knot design worked into the metal on the sides, a nod to my own heritage. It wasn't cheap, setting me back a good chunk of my savings, but its value wasn't in the price tag. It was in the thought, the hours I spent with the jeweler, the story behind the stone. I proposed at the local arboretum, in a secluded grove of birch trees where we had our third date. It was perfect. She cried, said yes, and the photo of her showing off the ring with tears in her eyes got hundreds of likes on social media. For a week, I was floating. That feeling came crashing down last Saturday. We were at a barbecue at her friend Tessa's house. I went inside to grab another round of beers from the cooler. As I was bending down, I heard her voice floating through the open kitchen window, just a few feet away. She was talking to Tessa and her other friend, Maya. Look at it, Isabella said, her voice dripping with a kind of weary disappointment I'd never heard before. A sapphire. It's sweet, I guess, if you're into that rustic. I forged it myself in a volcano vibe. Tessa giggled. He went to Jared? Worse, Izzy sighed. He went to his feelings. Honestly, it looks affordable. I only said yes out of pity. He had this look on his face like a shelter puppy waiting for adoption. I just couldn't crush him. Don't worry, it's a starter ring. I'll get him to upgrade to a proper diamond before the wedding. Something that actually sparkles. My blood went cold. I felt the heat rise in my face. A mix of pure humiliation and white-hot anger. Every thoughtful detail, every sacrificed weekend saving up, all of it reduced to a petty prize. I didn't move. I just stayed there, crouched by the cooler, listening to my future evaporate. I didn't storm out. I didn't yell. I quietly grabbed the beers, walked back outside, handed them around, and avoided her eyes. I waited for another 20 minutes, making small talk about property taxes with someone's dad, feeling like a ghost at my own party. When Isabella came looking for me, ready to leave, I met her by my car. You okay, honey? You've been quiet, she said, trying to loop her arm through mine. I stepped back and held out my hand, palm up. The ring, Isabella. Her smile faltered. What are you talking about? The ring. I repeated, my voice flat. Get back to me. Leo, stop it. You're being weird. What's wrong? She tried to laugh it off. The panic was just starting to flicker in her eyes. I just stood there, hand outstretched, silent. The silence was heavier than any argument. It stretched for what felt like an hour. Finally, with a frustrated huff, she wrenched the ring off her finger and slapped it into my palm. Fine. Be a baby, she snapped. I closed my fingers around it, the metal still warm from her skin. I got in my car, locked the doors, and drove away. Before I even left the neighborhood, I blocked her number. I drove for an hour with no destination, the angry music on the radio, just background noise to the roaring in my head. Eventually, I pulled over and called the one person in her family I always felt was 100% genuine. Her cousin, Clara. Update 1. It's been a week since the barbecue. The quiet tactical retreat has officially evolved into a low-grade war. Isabella, realizing she was blocked, has unleashed her friends. My phone has been buzzing with texts from numbers I don't recognize. They're all a variation on the same theme, ranging from Tessa's angry tirades, "You're a coward for humiliating her like that," to Maya's pleading messages, "She's a wreck, Leo. She didn't mean it. You know how she gets." I've ignored them all. Then came the call from her mother, Diana. I made the mistake of answering a number from an area code I recognized. "Leo, darling," she began, her voice syrupy sweet. "I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding, Diana." I heard what she said. "Oh, girl talk. You can't take that seriously," she scoffed. Isabella was just managing expectations with her friends. You know how girls are. Now, this has gone on long enough. You made your point. It's time to be a man, bring that ring back, and apologize for your little tantrum. I was so stunned by the sheer audacity, I almost laughed. Apologize? For what exactly? For embarrassing my daughter. You left her at a party, Leo. You made a scene. Whatever your little feelings were, you handle that in private. You don't cause a spectacle. The only spectacle was her mocking a gift I pour my heart into. The wedding is off. We're done, I said, and hung up before she could respond. The real headache started Tuesday. Before the proposal, Izzy and I had signed a lease on a new, much larger apartment. Move-in date was supposed to be in 3 weeks. In my excitement, I had paid the full security deposit and the first month's rent up front, a painful $6,000 hit. Now I just want out. I contacted the leasing office, explained the situation, and was prepared to forfeit the deposit to break the lease. But there's a problem. Both of us have to sign the termination agreement. Isabella is refusing. She had her lawyer. Yes, she lawyered up in a week. Send me an email. She will not sign the lease termination papers unless I agree to pay her an additional $5,000 for emotional distress and the disruption of her living situation. She's tried to hold the $6,000 hostage, knowing I can't get it back without her signature. Meanwhile, I've been talking to Clara a lot. She met me for coffee after I called her that first night. She wasn't surprised by Izzy's behavior. Her biggest fear is looking poor, Clara had said, shaking her head. And her definition of poor is anything that isn't dripping in brand names. It was validating to hear. Last night, my car wouldn't start. Dead battery. I was about to call for a tow when I remembered Clara lived just a few blocks away and was good with cars. I called her, and she came over with jumper cables and had me running in 10 minutes. We ended up grabbing a late dinner at a diner. It was easy. We talked for hours about nothing and everything. No posturing, no drama. It was the first time I'd felt genuinely relaxed in weeks. I think I'm starting to see what I was missing in my relationship with Izzy, a real partner. But first, I have to deal with the mess she's made. I'm not paying her a dime of that blackmail money. I spent today on the phone with a legal aid society getting advice. It seems my options are limited, but I'm not giving up. She thinks she has me cornered. She's about to find out how stubborn I can be. Update 2. It's been 3 weeks. The pressure campaign has intensified, and they've roped in the big guns. But the more they push, the more certain I am that I made the right decision. The lease situation remains a stalemate. My lawyer, I had to get my own, confirmed that without her signature, we're both on the hook. Her lawyer sent another letter, this time upping the demand. She now wants the $5,000. Plus, she wants me to pay the first 3 months of rent on her current apartment as a transitional stipend. The entitlement is breathtaking. She wants me to fund her life while she actively sabotages mine. Then her father, Richard, called me at work. He's always been the quiet, affable one, the good cop to Diana's bad cop. Leo, son, he started, his voice heavy with disappointment. I'm not going to pretend I understand what's going on in your head, but you're making a mess. You're hurting my little girl over some silly words. Richard, with all due respect, they weren't silly words. They showed me exactly how she sees me, as a stepping stone to a bigger diamond. He sighed dramatically. She's emotional. She says things. You're supposed to be the stable one. Look, I don't want to get involved, but I sit on the board of the Children's Literacy Fund. I happen to know your company is one of our major corporate sponsors. It would be a shame if the board had to reconsider that partnership due to, let's call it, unprofessional conduct for one of their employees creating public turmoil. The threat was veiled, but it was there. Mess with his daughter, and he'd try to mess with my career. I felt a cold knot of fear in my stomach for the first time. This was a new level of dirty. The bright spot in all of this has been Clara. We've been seeing each other regularly. Last weekend, we went to a street fair in the next town over. We were laughing, sharing a bag of kettle corn, and just enjoying the day. It felt natural, real. Of course, someone Izzy knows saw us. My phone blew up that night with a voicemail from an unknown number. It was Isabella, and she was incandescent with rage. "You are dating my cousin?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "My weird thrift store shopping cousin. You absolute monster. Are you that desperate to hurt me?" Flaunting her around town while I'm dealing with the mess you made. I hope you're both happy in that stupid, overpriced apartment you tricked me into signing for." Hearing that, something clicked. The anger, the threats, her assumption that the apartment was still somehow hers. An idea started to form. A risky, slightly crazy idea. The next morning, I called the leasing office. I explained the situation, the co-signer refusing to terminate. Then I proposed a different solution. "I'd like to take over the lease myself," I said. "I want to sign a new agreement, solely in my name. I will assume full responsibility for the entire term." The leasing agent was relieved. To them, a single committed tenant was better than two warring ones. They drew up the paperwork. I went in that afternoon and signed it. I am now the sole, legal leaseholder of the apartment. The $6,000 deposit and first month's rent are now credited to my solo account. Isabella and her lawyer got the notification that she had been formally released from all obligations regarding the lease. I got a smug email from her lawyer stating that they accepted my capitulation and that their financial demands were now void, as I had chosen to assume the burden. They think they won. They think I caved to the pressure and am now stuck paying for an expensive apartment I don't need, all by myself. They have no idea what's coming. Izzy's lease on her current place is up at the end of the month. The clock is ticking. Final update. It's been 2 months. The dust has settled, and the fallout was more spectacular than I could have imagined. The last day of the month was a Saturday. I knew Izzy's lease was up, and I had a pretty good idea what her plan was. Sure enough, around 11 a.m., a big yellow U-Haul truck pulled up in front of the new apartment building. Isabella hopped out of the passenger side, followed by Diana and Richard. She marched toward the front door with an air of triumphant ownership. I was already there. I had asked Clara to come with me, not for a confrontation, but for support. We were in the apartment, technically unpacking a box of books for the new shelves I had just assembled. The original locks had been changed the day I signed the new lease. We heard the commotion in the hallway. Izzy was jabbing her key at the lock, getting more and more frustrated when it wouldn't turn. "Leo, I know you're in there," she yelled, banging on the door. "Open my door." I opened it. I stood in the doorway, and Clara was visible behind me, holding a copy of a book we were discussing. Isabella's face went through about 5 emotions in 3 seconds. Confusion, rage, indignation, and finally, pure hatred. "What is SHE doing here?" she spat, pointing a finger at Clara. "Get out of my apartment." "It's not your apartment, Izzy," I said, my voice calm and even. "It's mine. You were formally removed from the lease 2 weeks ago. You got the legal notice. You're free of all obligations. Congratulations." Diana pushed past Izzy. "Now you listen here, Leo. We had an understanding. You took over the lease. You were going to do the right thing and let her live here. You owe her that." "I don't owe her anything," I said, looking past Diana to Isabella. "You told your friends you said yes out of pity. You mocked my proposal. Your father threatened my job. You tried to blackmail me for $5,000. The only understanding we have is that we are finished. You need to leave. You're trespassing." Richard stepped forward, his face red. "You can't do this to her. Where's she supposed to go?" "I hear her childhood bedroom is lovely this time of year," I said. The realization finally dawned on Isabella's face. This wasn't a negotiation. It was an eviction. She wasn't getting the apartment. She wasn't getting a payout. She was standing in the hallway with a truck full of her belongings and nowhere to put them. She just crumpled, right there, slumping against the wall and starting to sob. Not sad tears, but angry, frustrated sobs. The aftermath was messy, but it was their mess, not mine. Izzy and her belongings did, in fact, end up back at her parents' house. The family is completely fractured. Clara has been disowned by her aunt and uncle for siding with the enemy. She's sad about it, but also says she feels freer than she has in years. As for the ring, I took it back to the artisan. He sympathetically listened to the whole story. We removed the teal sapphire. He melted down the platinum band, and we used it, along with some new metal, to forge 2 simple, matching bands for me and Clara. Nothing fancy, just a symbol of starting over. The sapphire itself, he set into a beautiful, minimalist silver pendant. I gave it to Clara last week, not as a promise of marriage, but as a thank you. A symbol of taking something that was twisted into a weapon of ridicule and turning it back into something beautiful. I heard through the grapevine that when Izzy found out about the pendant, she had a complete meltdown. Life is quiet now. Clara and I are building something real in an apartment that feels like a sanctuary. We host our own small family dinners with her mom and my parents. The people who matter. I lost $6,000 and gained a world of self-respect. Izzy thought she could play games with my life, my finances, and my heart. She gambled that I would eventually cave to the pressure and her crocodile tears. She lost, and now she has to live with the consequences in her old bedroom, surrounded by boxes she has nowhere else to put. Some things, it turns out, are more valuable than a 2-carat diamond.